The silence in our house was a living thing. It had been for the years since my mother, Eleanor, passed away. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that my father, Richard, and my stepmother, Brenda, seemed to cultivate. They moved through the halls of the home my mother had designed, the Willow Creek house, like ghosts who had already claimed possession. I was the only thing standing in their way. I was 17, and the grief was still a raw, open wound. My mother had been my sun, my moon, and all my stars. She was a brilliant landscape architect who saw life and potential in everything. My father, a stern man of finance, had seen her as an asset. When she got sick, his attention shifted to Brenda, his unervingly cheerful and ambitious new partner. They married 6 months after Mom's funeral. The anniversary of Mom's death was also the day of the will reading. We sat in the sterile office of Mr. Abernathy, my mother's longtime lawyer. He was a kind, weary-looking man who peered at us over his spectacles with an air of profound sadness. "Eleanor's will is quite specific," he began, his voice raspy. He cleared his throat and read the legal jargon. The Willow Creek house, her substantial investment portfolio, and all personal effects were to be placed in a trust. I felt a flicker of relief. A trust would protect it. But then came the clause. "The sole beneficiary of this trust is my daughter, Elara Vance," Mr. Abernathy read. "She will gain full, unrestricted control of all assets on her 18th birthday." I saw Brenda's perfectly painted lips tighten into a thin line. My father shifted in his seat, his jaw clenching. I was turning 18 in 2 weeks. Mr. Abernathy wasn't finished. He took a deep breath, as if bracing himself. "However, there is a stipulation. In the event that Elara is deemed mentally or emotionally unfit to manage her affairs, or if she willingly signs over fiduciary control to her legal guardian, her father, Richard Vance, before her 19th birthday, then he and his current spouse will assume full control of the trust." The room went cold. I stared at the lawyer, then at my father and Brenda. A slow, predatory smile was spreading across Brenda's face. My father's expression was one of cold calculation. They had 1 year. 1 year from my 18th birthday to break me or trick me. 1 year to take everything my mother had built. "Well," Brenda said, her voice dripping with false sympathy as we drove home. "That's a lot of responsibility for a young girl. Your mother must have known you'd need your father's guidance." That night, the change began. My life, which was already a quiet hell of grief, descended into a new, more active kind of torment. My phone was the first thing to go. "Too many distractions, darling," Brenda cooed, plucking it from my hand. "You need to focus on healing." My laptop privileges were restricted to schoolwork only, monitored from the main living room. My friends' calls went unanswered. When one of them, Chloe, came to the door, Brenda told her I was unwell and needed complete rest. I was being isolated, cut off from my support system piece by piece. The psychological games were worse. Brenda would accidentally donate a box of my mother's books to charity. She replaced the beautiful, earthy-toned linens my mom loved with stark white ones that felt clinical and cold. "A fresh start," she'd chirp. My father played his part with chilling precision. He would sit me down for talks about my future. "Elara, you're emotional. You're grieving. You're not in a position to handle this kind of wealth. It would be a disaster," he'd say, his voice a low, reasonable drone. "Signing control over to me is the sensible, mature thing to do. It's what your mother would have wanted." But I knew my mother. She was the most meticulous planner I'd ever known. She designed gardens that bloomed in perfect succession, creating a rolling wave of color from spring to fall. She wouldn't have left a loophole like this by accident. This wasn't a mistake, it was a test. A warning. One evening, I found the strength to push back. Brenda was commenting on a painting in the hall, a vibrant landscape my mother had painted herself. "It's a bit dreary, don't you think?" I was thinking something more modern would brighten up this space. "You will not touch that painting," I said, my voice shaking but firm. Brenda turned, her smile vanishing. Her eyes were like chips of ice. Excuse me? That was my mother's, I repeated, standing my ground. It stays. My father stepped in. Elara, that's enough. Brenda is the lady of this house now. You will show her respect. This is my mother's house. I shot back, tears welling in my eyes. That was the moment they showed their true colors. Brenda's face twisted into a sneer. Not for long, you little brat. You have no idea what you're up against. We will get what we are owed, and you will be left with nothing. Your mother was a fool to think you could protect her legacy. The cruelty was so raw, so open, it stole my breath. In that moment, the grief that had clouded my mind began to clear, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. This was a war. And my mother, the brilliant strategist, would not have sent me into battle unarmed. I just had to find the weapon she had hidden from me. The weeks after my 18th birthday were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Richard and Brenda's campaign escalated from passive-aggressive moves to a full-blown siege on my sanity. My world shrank to the dimensions of the Willow Creek house, and within its walls, I was a prisoner. Brenda took immense pleasure in erasing my mother. She packed away my mom's favorite coffee mugs, her worn gardening gloves, even the scented soap she used to keep in the guest bathroom. Each discarded item was a small stab to my heart. She'd hold something up, a thoughtful frown on her face. Oh, this old thing? Surely you don't need this, Elara. We need to declutter. My father, meanwhile, shifted his tactics from feigned concern to overt pressure. He started leaving financial documents on the dining table, complex legal papers filled with intimidating jargon. Just some preliminary forms, Elara, he'd say casually. Mr. Abernathy's office sent them over. It's to streamline the process when you're ready to sign. I knew he was lying. Mr. Abernathy would never send documents without speaking to me first. I'd glance at the papers, my heart pounding, then retreat to my room. My compliance was making them bolder, more arrogant. They saw a broken, grieving girl who was slowly capitulating. They were wrong. My mother had a favorite saying, borrowed from an old book, "Be clever like a fox, my love." The hounds are loud, but the fox knows the forest. I started to think like a fox. I needed to find the hidden paths my mother had left for me. My search began in her study. It was the one room Brenda hadn't dared to touch yet, mostly because it was filled with heavy oak furniture and thousands of books on botany and landscape design. It smelled like old paper and dried lavender, the ghost of my mother's presence. I told Brenda I was going in there to sort through Mom's things, an act of coming to terms with my grief. She bought it, seeing it as a sign of my surrender. For days, I searched. I ran my fingers along the spines of every book, checked inside every drawer, tapped on every wall for a hollow sound. Nothing. I felt a sliver of despair. Had I overestimated her? Had she simply made a terrible mistake in her will? Then, I remembered the fox. A fox doesn't look for the obvious. It looks for what's hidden in plain sight. My eyes fell upon a shelf of classic literature. My mother loved these stories, but one, in particular, was her absolute favorite, The Count of Monte Cristo. She'd read it to me when I was younger, a tale of betrayal, patience, and meticulously planned revenge. Her copy was old and worn, the spine soft from use. I pulled it from the shelf. It felt different, heavier than it should. I fanned the pages, and tucked into a hollowed-out section in the back was not a letter, but a small, ornate, old-fashioned brass key. Taped next to it was a tiny, folded piece of paper. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. It wasn't a note. It was a receipt from a local post office for a private box rental, dated 2 weeks before she died. The box number was 1138. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. This was the weapon. Getting out of the house was the next challenge. I couldn't just walk out. Brenda watched me like a hawk. I had to be clever. The next morning, I feigned a terrible stomach ache. I moaned and doubled over, making a show of being too weak to even get out of bed. Brenda was irritated. Honestly, Elara, you're always so dramatic. I think it might be appendicitis, I whispered, a trick I'd learned from a medical drama. That got their attention. The thought of a medical emergency and potential hospital bills was enough to make my father act. Fine, he snapped. I'll drive you to the walk-in clinic. The clinic was downtown, only 3 blocks from the post office. It was a calculated risk. As my father sat impatiently in the waiting room, I told the nurse I needed to use the restroom. My stomach was gurgling, I said, looking pale and pathetic. She pointed me down the hall. Instead of going to the restroom, I slipped out a side door. My legs felt like lead as I ran, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The post office was old and stately. I found the wall of P.O. boxes and slid the brass key into lock 1138. It turned with a satisfying click. Inside was a thick manila envelope addressed to me in my mother's elegant script. My name, Elara Vance, the Fox. I tore it open. Inside were 2 things. The first was a letter to me. The second was a sealed envelope with a single name on it, Mr. Abernathy. I unfolded my letter, my eyes scanning the words she had written in her final days. My dearest Fox. If you are reading this, it means you were clever enough to find it. I am so proud of you. I am sorry for the test I have put you through, but I knew Richard's character, and I knew what he would do once I was gone. I could not leave you unprotected. The will is a trap, Elara, but not for you. It is for him. The unfit clause is bait. His greed is the hound, and it will lead him exactly where I want him to go. You must do 2 things. First, you must play the part. Let them think they are winning. Let them see you as broken. The more confident they become, the more careless they will be. Second, take the other envelope to Mr. Abernathy. He was my most trusted friend. He knows everything. He is your ally in this. He will hold the final piece of the puzzle. Trust him. Be patient. Your time will come. Remember, the fox always outwits the hounds. All my love, forever. Mom. Tears streamed down my face, not tears of grief, but of overwhelming love and gratitude. She hadn't abandoned me. She had armed me. I tucked the letter into my pocket, grabbed the envelope for the lawyer, and sprinted back to the clinic, slipping back inside just as my father was getting up to look for me. Where have you been? He demanded. The line for the restroom was long, I mumbled, clutching my stomach. I feel a little better now. He grunted, appeased. On the drive home, I stared out the window, the sealed envelope a heavy weight in my jacket. The hunt was on. But they were no longer hunting me. I was now hunting them. The letter from my mother felt like a shield. Her words were armor, and the knowledge that Mr. Abernathy was on my side was the sword I desperately needed. The challenge now was contacting him without alerting the 2 dragons guarding my castle. For a week, I played the part my mother had assigned me. I became more withdrawn, more listless. I answered Brenda's barbs with mumbled apologies and met my father's manipulative speeches with downcast eyes. I let them see a girl on the verge of snapping. Their confidence swelled. Brenda started openly browsing for expensive furniture online, planning the redecoration of her new home. My father began taking calls with wealth managers, speaking in hushed, excited tones. They were already spending my inheritance. My opportunity came in the form of a history project. We were required to use library archives, and even Brenda couldn't argue against a mandatory school assignment. She insisted on driving me to the public library and gave me a strict 2-hour time limit. And no funny business, Elara. I'll be back for you at precisely 4 p.m. Yes, Brenda, I said meekly. The moment her car disappeared, I headed for the public payphone at the back of the library. My heart thudded as I dialed Mr. Abernathy's office number, which I had memorized from his business card. Abernathy and Finch, how can I help you? A polite receptionist answered. I need to speak with Mr. Abernathy, please. My name is Elara Vance. I tried to keep my voice steady. There was a pause. "One moment, Miss Vance." A few seconds later, his warm, raspy voice came on the line. "Elara? Is everything all right?" "Mr. Abernathy," I whispered, "I'm at the public library. I have something for you." "Something from my mother." There was another pause, but this time it felt different, charged with understanding. "I see," he said slowly. "Eleanor, she was always 10 steps ahead. Where can we meet?" "I only have 2 hours. I can't go to your office." "Stay right there. There's a small coffee shop, the Daily Grind, 2 blocks north of the library. I'll be in a booth at the back in 15 minutes. Ask for a table under the name Montague." It was a code. Montague, from Romeo and Juliet. Another classic. A small smile touched my lips. My mother had chosen her allies well. The coffee shop was cozy and filled with the scent of roasted beans. I saw Mr. Abernathy in the back, looking more like a kind grandfather than a shrewd lawyer. I slid into the booth opposite him, my hands trembling as I pulled the sealed envelope from my bag. "She said you would know what to do," I said, pushing it across the table. He took it, his eyes filled with a deep, sorrowful respect. "Your mother was the most brilliant and brave woman I have ever known. She fought for you until her very last breath." He opened the envelope and pulled out a single, notarized document. It was a codicil to the will and amendment. He read it silently, a grim satisfaction settling on his features. "This," he said, tapping the paper, "is the entire game, Elara." He explained the plan, and it was more ingenious than I could have imagined. My mother had predicted the coercion. The will's primary clause, the one about me being unfit or willingly signing, was the bait. The codicil was the spring-loaded trap. It stated that if any evidence of undue influence, emotional distress, or coercive action from my father or his current spouse was proven to have occurred within the 1-year window, 2 things would happen. First, the clause allowing them to take control would be rendered completely null and void. Second, a new clause would be triggered, one that completely disinherited my father. Not just from my mother's trust, but from a separate personal fund she had designated for him, which he didn't even know existed. "She's essentially daring him to be greedy," Mr. Abernathy explained. "If he behaves honorably for 1 year, he gets a small, respectable inheritance. If he tries to steal yours, he loses everything." "So how do we prove it?" I asked, my mind racing. "That, Elara, is your part of the mission. You must continue to play the victim. But now, you are not just surviving, you are gathering evidence. We need a record. A journal. Dates, times, direct quotes of what they say, descriptions of what they do. Every threat, every manipulation." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small, slim object. It was a burner phone. "This is for emergencies only. It can also record audio. If you can get a recording of them explicitly threatening you or pressuring you to sign the papers, that would be the final nail in their coffin." He looked at me, his expression serious. "This will not be easy. You have to endure their cruelty, knowing you have the power to stop them, but you must wait until the last possible moment. They need to believe they have one. They need to hand you the pen to sign the final documents. The closer you get to your 19th birthday, the more desperate and careless they will become. That's when they will make their fatal mistake." I took the phone, its cool weight of comfort in my hand. For the first time in a year, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like an agent in a covert operation designed by my own mother. A secret soldier in a war she had orchestrated from beyond the grave. "I can do it," I said, my voice filled with a newfound resolve. "I know you can," Mr. Abernathy said with a gentle smile. "You are Eleanor's daughter, after all." I left the coffee shop and walked back to the library, my head held high. When Brenda's car pulled up to the curb at 4 p.m. on the d, I slid into the passenger seat, my face a perfect mask of tired resignation. "Did you get your work done?" she asked, her tone sharp. "Yes, Brenda," I replied. The lie came easily. My real work was just beginning. The next 10 months were the longest of my life. I lived a double existence. To Richard and Brenda, I was Alara, the broken doll, a girl so worn down by their relentless campaign that she barely had the energy to speak. But in the silent hours of the night, I was Alara, the secret archivist of their cruelty, the executor of my mother's final, brilliant plan. The burner phone Mr. Abernathy gave me became my most prized possession. I kept it hidden in a hollowed-out book, not Monte Cristo, that was too obvious, but a dense, boring textbook on 18th-century tax law. No one would ever open that. Every night, I would document the day's events in a password-protected note file. October 12th, Brenda lost the silver locket Mom gave me for my 16th birthday. Said it must have fallen into the trash. She was smiling when she said it. November 5th, Dad held another meeting. Showed me spreadsheets of how much money the estate was losing under the trust's current management. Said I was being irresponsible by not letting him take over. December 20th, they informed me I would not be visiting my maternal grandparents for Christmas. Brenda said it was important for us to bond as a new family. The closer we got to my 19th birthday, the more brazen they became. They saw the finish line and were sprinting towards it, their greed making them sloppy. This was exactly what my mother and Mr. Abernathy had predicted. The perfect opportunity for an audio recording came in late July, less than a month before the deadline. My father called me into his study. Brenda was there, perched on the edge of his desk like a vulture. A stack of freshly printed legal documents sat between them. Alara, my father began, his tone oozing with false magnanimity. We've had the final papers drawn up. They're very simple. You just sign here, and all of this burden, will be lifted from your shoulders. I had the burner phone in my pocket, the recording app already active. I just had to get them to expose themselves. I don't know, I mumbled, looking at the floor. Mr. Abernathy said I should wait. Brenda scoffed, her voice sharp and ugly. Mr. Abernathy works for the trust, not for you. He gets paid as long as this nonsense continues. He doesn't care about you. Your stepmother is right, my father said, leaning forward. His voice dropped to a menacing growl. We have been patient with you, Alara. Incredibly patient. But our patience is wearing thin. You are living under our roof, eating our food. You will sign these papers. This is no longer a request. What if I don't want to? I whispered, my heart racing. This was it. Brenda slid off the desk and stood over me, her voice a venomous hiss. Let me make this very clear to you, you ungrateful little girl. If you do not sign these papers before your birthday, we will make your life a living hell you cannot even imagine. We will contest the will. We will drag you through a court case and paint you as an unstable, hysterical child who is a danger to herself. We will drain the trust with legal fees. By the time it's over, there will be nothing left for you. Sign the papers, and you can go to college and pretend none of this ever happened. Refuse, and we will ruin you. Do you understand me? My father nodded in agreement. It's your choice, Alara. The easy way, or the hard way. Got it, I thought, a surge of adrenaline washing over me. I risked a glance up, my eyes wide with fake fear. Okay, I whimpered. I'll think about it. I fled the room before they could press me further, my hand protectively covering the phone in my pocket. That night, I emailed the audio file to a secure address Mr. Abernathy had provided. His reply came the next morning, checkmate. Well done, Fox. The stage is set. Let me know the date of the signing. I spent the next few weeks in a haze of anticipation. I told my father I would sign the papers on August 28th, the day before my 19th birthday. A morbid sense of poetry appealed to me, they would have their victory for less than 24 hours. They were ecstatic. Their entire demeanor changed. They were suddenly kind, showering me with praise for my mature decision. Brenda bought me a new dress for the occasion. A celebration dress, she trilled. They planned a lavish dinner for the evening of the 28th, complete with champagne to toast their victory. On the morning of the 28th, the house was filled with an electric tension. Brenda was humming as she arranged flowers in the foyer. My father was on the phone, laughing with his broker. They were so sure they had one. They looked at me and saw a defeated child. They had no idea they were looking at their executioner. At 5 p.m., they called me into the study. The papers were laid out on the polished mahogany desk. A fancy fountain pen sat beside them. The celebratory champagne was already on ice. "Ready, darling?" Brenda asked, her smile wide and triumphant. My father pushed the papers towards me. "Just sign at the bottom of each page, Alara. Then we can put all this unpleasantness behind us." I sat down, my hands surprisingly steady. I picked up the heavy pen. I looked from my father's greedy, expectant face to Brenda's smug smirk. I thought of my mother, of her love and her foresight. I thought of the hell they had put me through for an entire year. I touched the tip of the pen to the paper, right above the signature line. I looked up at them, and for the first time in a year, I let them see the real me. I smiled. It wasn't a whimpering, broken smile. It was sharp, cold, and utterly confident. "You know," I said, my voice clear and strong. "I don't think I will." The silence that followed my words was more profound than any that had come before. It was a silence of pure, unadulterated shock. Brenda's triumphant smile froze, then crumbled. My father's face went from expectant to confused to a dark, thunderous red. "What did you just say?" he hissed, his voice dangerously low. I placed the pen neatly back on the desk beside the stack of papers. I said, "I won't be signing. I don't think it will be necessary. This isn't a game, Alara." Brenda shrieked, her carefully constructed composure shattering like glass. "You will sign those papers right now." "Actually," I said, leaning back in the chair, feeling a calm I hadn't felt in years, "I think the game is over." As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Brenda and Richard exchanged a panicked look. They weren't expecting anyone. Their private celebration was about to be interrupted. "I'll get rid of them," my father snarled, stalking out of the study. A moment later, his voice, raised in anger, was cut short. Then, footsteps. Not just his, but two other sets. Mr. Abernathy walked into the study, his expression grim and resolute. Beside him stood a stern-looking woman in a business suit, holding a leather portfolio. My father trailed behind them, his face pale and slack-jawed. "Abernathy! What is the meaning of this?" Brenda demanded, her voice shrill. "Good evening, Brenda, Richard," Mr. Abernathy said calmly. He gestured to the woman beside him. "This is Ms. Albright, from the state's probate court. We have some legal matters to clarify." He walked over to the desk and placed his briefcase on it with a solid thud. "It has come to our attention that certain pressures have been applied to my client, Alara Vance, regarding her inheritance." My father found his voice. "That's a lie. She agreed to sign. She was about to sign." "Was she?" Mr. Abernathy asked, raising an eyebrow. He then looked at me. "Alara, did you record the conversation you and I discussed on the evening of July 22nd? I pulled the burner phone from my pocket and placed it on the desk. "I did." Mr. Abernathy pressed play. The room filled with Brenda's venomous threats and my father's menacing ultimatum. "We will ruin you. Do you understand me?" Brenda's face went white as a sheet. My father looked as if he'd been physically struck. That's taken out of context," he sputtered. "I don't think so," Mr. Abernathy said coolly. He opened his briefcase and produced the codicil, the document my mother had hidden away. Eleanor Vance was a very wise woman. She anticipated this exact scenario. He explained the codicil in full, his voice echoing in the stunned silence. He detailed the clause about undue influence, the immediate nullification of their claim, and the final, devastating blow of my father's complete disinheritance. "As of this moment," Mr. Abernathy declared, "Richard, you have no claim to any part of Eleanor's estate. The proof of your coercion is undeniable. The audio recording, combined with a year's worth of journal entries kept by Alara, paints a very clear picture. Ms. Albright, the court official, stepped forward. Furthermore, she said, her voice devoid of emotion, we will be opening an investigation into potential charges of duress and attempted fiduciary fraud. But for now, I have a court order. She opened her portfolio and handed a document to my father. This is an order of eviction. The Willow Creek house and all property within it are the sole assets of the Eleanor Vance Trust, under the exclusive direction of Alara Vance. You are no longer legal residents. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises with your personal belongings. The world seemed to tilt. Brenda let out a small, strangled gasp and sank into a chair. My father stared at the paper as if it were written in a dead language, his face a mask of utter devastation. All their scheming, their cruelty, their meticulous, year-long campaign of terror, it had all led to this. To them being thrown out of the house they were so certain they had won, with nothing. Less than nothing, with legal trouble now looming over them. Their greed had not just cost them the inheritance, it had cost them everything. They left the next morning, packing their things in a tense, furious silence. They didn't look at me. They couldn't. I stood at the window of my mother's study and watched their car pull out of the driveway one last time, shrinking into the distance until it was gone. And then, for the first time in over a year, the house was quiet. But it wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of before. It was a light, peaceful silence. A silence of freedom. In the months that followed, I came into my own. With Mr. Abernathy's guidance, I took control of my mother's trust. I learned that her true legacy wasn't just the money, it was a foundation she had outlined in her final papers, the Eleanor Vance Conservancy, dedicated to creating and protecting public gardens and green spaces in underserved communities. She had left me not just wealth, but a purpose. I began restoring the Willow Creek house to its former glory, filling it with the colors and life my mother had loved. I invited my grandparents and Chloe over. Laughter echoed in the halls once more. I enrolled in university to study botany and business, ready to lead my mother's foundation. One afternoon, standing in the garden my mother had planted, I felt the sun on my face. The fox had outsmarted the hounds. I had not only protected my mother's legacy, I had become it. And I was finally, truly, free.